Hi, I'm Dave Vickers and welcome to the Photo Show. In today's episode we're going to be looking at the new Nikon release, the D7500. Remember, if you like what you see on the Photo Show, please comment, like and subscribe in the boxes below. Let's get on and look at the Nikon D7500. So Nikon have announced a new camera and it's going to be available in the summer, and it's a successor to its successful D7000 range. This started off with the Nikon D7000, then was upgraded to the D7100, then to the D7200, and as logic dictates, the new camera is going to be the Nikon D7500. Now, I'm not sure what happened to the D7300 and the D7400, but I do think I've worked out why they've decided to go for the D7500, but we'll come to that in a while when we've gone through a few of the specs. So, what have we got here? The Nikon D7500 is a crop sensor APS-C size camera. It's using a 20.9 megapixel sensor, which is the same as from the D500. It's a slight downgrade because the D7200 had a 24.9 megapixel sensor. So you are losing a bit of megapixel size here. But with it being the newer sensor and it being only 4 megapixels, I don't think that's going to make a massive amount of difference. I think we're still going to get great quality. We know what kind of quality comes from the D500, so I would expect a similar kind of image quality to come from the D7500. It's also using the newer X-Speed 5 processor, which was also found in the D500. And I think here, this is where we're getting the answer to why it's the D7500. I think what they decided to do is they've used quite a few of the components from the D500 and placed it into a body which is the same as the D7200. The D7500 has a virtually identical body to the D7100 and the D7200. It's smaller and lighter than the D500 would be. So we're getting a compact sized DSLR compared to the slightly larger D500. So if you're looking for something that's smaller and lighter, then possibly this is the camera that's going to fall in that range for you. The ISO range has been improved in the D7200, and it now goes natively from ISO 100 to ISO 51400, which is exactly the same ISO range as you're getting on the D500 again. Again, it's another thing that's passed over from one camera to the other. It is expandable up to a crazy 1,640,000 ISO, which is the same as the D500 again. But to be honest, at that kind of ISO range, the images are virtually unusable. It's much more of a gimmick selling point than it is. But natively, the ISO range is ISO 100 to ISO 51400. So you're getting an improvement in ISO range over the D7200 there. The D7500 has a maximum shutter speed of 1/8000th of a second, which is exactly the same as the D7200 and the D500, and a lot of DSLRs in this range as well. It's only mirrorless cameras where you're getting the faster shutter speed using the electronic shutter. So 1/8000th of a second is a fairly standard maximum shutter speed. Improvements on the D5000 is in the shooting frame rate. It will now shoot at 8 frames per second, compared to the D7200, which would only shoot at 6 frames per second, and the D500, which shoots at 10 frames per second. So this is sitting right in the middle area between those two. I think the 8 frames a second will bring it up to be usable if you're shooting sports or wildlife, so that's an improvement over the D7200 in the frame rate on the camera. Autofocus on the D7500 remains exactly the same as it was on the D7200. It's got 51 autofocus points, with 15 of them being cross-type. There is the addition of a Group AF function now, which carries down from the D500. But apart from that, it's virtually the same autofocus system that's found in the D7200 and the D7100. So not much of an improvement there. It hasn't used the autofocus system from the D500. With the camera using the newer X-Speed 5 processor, the D7500 has a much better buffer rate than the D7200. It's going to allow you to shoot 100 JPEGs and 50 RAW files, compared to the 6 RAW files that you were getting from the D7200. But it's not as high a buffer rate as you're getting on the D500. But I think they've got to make a difference here between sort of, you know, what you're getting for the D500 and what you're going to get with the D7500. But much improved buffer rate. Again, if you're shooting sports or wildlife and you're shooting rapid amounts of images, the improved buffer rate is going to be an improvement over the previous cameras in this range. As I said earlier, the body is exactly the same as the D7100 and the D7200. The only addition here is they've now added the tilting touchscreen that is found on the D500. So it looks like we're getting a bit of a parts bin compilation on this camera. So we've got the same body as the D7200, but with the addition of the tilt screen that you're finding on the D500 as well. On the downside, it does seem that there are a few things that have been taken away from previous cameras in this model. One of the major ones is that the D7500 now only has a single SD card slot, where both the D7100 and the D7200 offer dual card slots. And I think if you were shooting video, I mean, nowadays video takes up a lot more file space than stills imagery, and having the dual card slot was always a good option to have within these cameras. But it seems like Nikon, I don't know if it's a cost-cutting exercise, have taken away the dual card slot and just given the D7500 a single card slot. So there's an element here of, Nikon giveth, Nikon taketh away. But if you can live with a single card slot, then that's obviously not too much of a problem. Video-wise, the D7500 will now shoot in 4K, which is an improvement over the D71 and D7200. It will shoot at 24, 25 and 30 frames per second in 4K. That being said, it is just utilising the central area of the sensor. So you are adding an additional crop factor when you're shooting in 4K. It will crop in more than it does when you're shooting at 1080 or when you're shooting stills imagery. So it does shoot in 4K. It will shoot up to 30 minutes, which is standard on most DSLRs. But there will be a crop factor, bringing the crop factor to about a 2.2 times crop compared to the 1.5 crop that you're getting on the standard DX size sensor. Price-wise, the D7500 is going to be coming out at £1,299 in the UK or $1,250 in the US. Seems a slight discrepancy in the exchange rate, but that's the prices that have been issued so far for this camera. I mean, comparing that to the D500, which is £1,800 or $2,000, it's obviously offering a cheaper option. So, in conclusion, I think the D7500 is set to sit somewhere between the older D7200 and the newer upgrade D500. So if you're someone that's looking at a camera like the D500 but feel it's too expensive, then possibly the D7500 is going to offer you a more affordable choice in that area. It does have a lot of the features that the D500 has, but it's also taking away a lot of the features that the earlier models in this range had as well. The 4K video, if that's important to you, then obviously this is a camera to be looking at. If 4K video isn't that important to you, then I would definitely say keep an eye out on the prices for the D7200, because once this is released, that price is going to drop down quite dramatically. And the D7200 is still a great camera, and as I said, there are a lot of features that are similar in this new camera to that older model. So for now, I'm Dave Vickers, this is The Photo Show, thanks for watching, see you next time.